أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to 14 Divine Guides, the show that looks at the lives of the 14 infallibles, inshallah. And during these shows we try to take lessons from the lives of the infallibles to benefit us in this life and inshallah in the next life. With me, His Eminence, as last week show, His Eminence Sayyid Mahdi al-Qazwini. We welcome him. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyidina.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
For the viewers that missed last week's show, you can watch the episode online on demand. If you want a recap of the show, we spoke about who the Imam was, his parents, his birth, looked at the time the Imam lived in, the government, the ruling government at that time. The Imam also took part in a lot of debates. We also looked at that, and we looked at a brief of his qualities and main attributes that the Imam had. And inshallah in today's show we will continue our discussion about the 8th Imam Ali ibn Musa Ridha salamullahi alayh, with His Eminence Sayyid Mahdi. Sayyidina will start just a few steps from where we finished off in our last episode. In the month of Rajab, Harun al-Rashid poisons Imam al-Kadhem salamullahi alayh, and Imam Ridha obviously buries his father. If we can, just for the viewers, a recap on those last few maybe moments of, or few days of Imam al-Kadhem, and why Harun decided to poison the Imam even though he had him in a prison. Why did he decide to poison Imam al-Kadhem salamullahi alayh?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, going back, we find that Imam al-Kadhem salawatullah wa salamu alayh, even though he spent those many years in prison, people still sought him. His followers were strengthened through his presence, even though he was not in direct contact with many of them. People began to become inclined more and more towards Ahlulbayt. Remember when the Abbasis took power, they did so with the claim that they would secure power, first take it away from Banu Umayyah and then hand it to Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, the rightful heirs. But after many years and after many decades, people started realizing that, in reality this isn't the case. They are securing it for themselves. So Harun decided to get rid of the Imam by poisoning him, even though he had spent much of his last few years in a dungeon in a prison with very, very limited access to his family members and his friends. And even, so those times were very hard upon the Imam and his family, and even during his final moments access to him was very limited. However, they managed to get access to him. Some of the family members of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, they were living in Baghdad at that time. And so when the Imam passed away, what Harun, one of the things that he tried to do was, number one, he tried to prove that the Imam had passed away naturally, not out of poison. So they would bring people, just like in today when they bring a coroner in order to perform an autopsy. These people would come in and they would, look at they would study the anatomy and everything, and then, of course, they were brought in by the Khalifa. So in the end, they would decide that, he died of natural causes and there was no foul play involved or anything like this. Of course, it was obvious that the Imam was poisoned. It was obvious to those who knew. I mean, all of the Imams before him were also poisoned, and it was this was their path that they all were walking down. What he tried to do after the death was that he tried to organize a funeral for the Imam. So basically, he would be the one that is commemorating the death. I mean, these people tried to seize every single opportunity that they had for their own gain and for their own benefit. Even after the death, yeah. So what happened was, they tried to arrange a funeral, and then the members of the household of Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam, they also tried to arrange a funeral, and some conflict took place. And the body of the Imam was left on the bridge which, you know, they call today, which links between the two areas of Baghdad, Kadhimiyya and A'dhamiyya. It was basically left on something like an altar for everybody to see, and the whole time a conflict was taking place between the forces of Harun and some of the family members and companions of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. In the end, you know, the Ahlul Bayt were able to bury the Imam, and as you see today, his shrine is visited by millions globally. Now, what happened after that, of course, was the Imam, basically the conflict between Amin al-Ma'mun, as we mentioned in the last episode. And then after al-Ma'mun secures the power for himself, he goes to Khurasan, and he decides to bring the Imam to Khurasan with him. But the Imam, before going there, he goes to Kufa and Basra in order to rally the support of the followers of Ahlul Bayt, which were there at the time. And then from there he arrives to Khurasan, where he is with the Khalifa.
As mentioned, there's a few times that the Imam al-Kadhem declares that Imam Ridha will be the Imam after him to close companions, and we mentioned why he does it to only close companions in our previous episode. But what are we understand that every Imam is an infallible, and the Imam is the best in all attributes, characteristics at the time. What are the proofs of this when it comes to Imam al-Ridha, the proofs of his imamat and his infallibility?
Well, number one, most importantly, we have the proofs of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. I mean, if you look at our books of hadith, we have authentic narrations in our school of thought, of course, that the Prophet himself mentioned the names of the Imams which would come after him. So number one, we have the hadith of Rasulullah. Number two, every single one of these Imams, they stood out from between their brothers, from between their siblings. And they truly held the characteristics of a person who is an Imam, an infallible. So if we read about the seerah of the 8th Imam from birth, literally from birth to in his infant stages, in his toddler stages, and you know, they recognize the signs of the Imamah in him, even in his childhood, even in his youth, when he was under the guidance of his father, al-Imam al-Kadhem alayhi salam. So the signs were all there. Plus we have the ahadith of his father as well. His father would say that he is the Imam after me. He is my successor after me. When people would ask him, who do we follow after you? He would say, follow Alim al-Muhammad, the knowledgeable, the scholar of al-Muhammad, and that is my son, Ali al-Ridha alayhi salam. So most importantly, we have definite proofs from the Ahlul Bayt, from the Prophet and from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, of the infallibility and the Imamah of the 8th Imam.
As you mentioned, Sayyidina, al-Ma'mun calls on Imam Ridha to come to Khurasan, and then he appoints Imam Ridha in his government. Not any position, he actually appoints him as his vice. What were the motives behind this by al-Ma'mun? My first question, and maybe the second and most important question is, how can the Imam accept this to work under what we can call a corrupt government?
Very important question. First of all, al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi was extremely clever. He wanted to win the hearts of the people. Where he was in Khurasan, there were many followers of Ahlul Bayt at that time. He knew that their hearts inclined to Ahlul Bayt. They had a special inclination towards Al-Imam Ali ibn Musa Ridha. So it was a political move. It was a gesture, just a facade, basically. Now, when we read about this history, it's very interesting, because some historians narrate that when he offered him this position, first he offered him his own position. He said, I'll offer you my own position as being the Khalifa. The Imam refuses. So then he tells him, then you must be my vice, my heir, second in line. The Imam wants to refuse. The historians tell us that Al-Ma'mun threatens him with death. He tells him, you will either serve or you will either be killed. And the Imam, I mean, of course, he is ordered by Allah to protect his own life, to protect the lives of his companions as well, his family members. And so under these circumstances, he accepted to become the vice. Now, since he accepted, Al-Ma'mun began placing conditions. He said there are a few conditions. Number one, that you do not command anyone or forbid anyone from doing anything. This is number one. Number two, you do not install anyone into power. And number three, you do not take anyone away from power. You do not take power from anyone. So, I mean, if you take these three conditions, then what is left for the Imam to do? Nothing, absolutely nothing. This tells us that it was just merely a figurehead, a facade, something which Al-Ma'mun would be able to gather support for himself and his own family through appointing the Imam. Now, number one, we said that the Imam's life was under threat, so he had to accept. Number two, well, some people would ask, well, why would he work under a government which is oppressive? One of the nicknames of the Imam is As-Siddiq, the truthful. It is said that he was named, according to one of the Imams of Ahlulbayt, they say he was named so because of his similarity to Yusuf as-Siddiq, the Prophet Yusuf. Now, if you compare the case of Prophet Yusuf with the Imam, well, the Prophet Yusuf worked under people who worshipped, you know, they were disbelievers, basically, disbelievers. So, I mean, which is worse, to work under a disbeliever, I mean, this is mentioned in the Quran, or to work under a Muslim? I mean, at the end of the day, Al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi was a Muslim. He bared witness that there is no Allah, no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he's granted that title as-Siddiq because he is similar. Not only that, the companions of the Imams were also asked by the Imams to work with the government. I mean, just like you find in the days of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam. Take the example of Salman al-Muhammadi. Salman al-Muhammadi, without a doubt, was one of the closest companions to the Prophet and to Imam Ali alayhi salam. From the beginning, he was a companion of Amir al-Mu'minin. He walked in the footsteps of Amir al-Mu'minin. However, out of necessity, and upon the advice of Imam Amir al-Mu'minin, he became the governor of Mada'in under the government which had its disputes with Amir al-Mu'minin, which Amir al-Mu'minin saw that it was his right which was taken away. But at the same time, he did not say, well, I will not deal with this government at all. He sent Salman al-Muhammadi to work with this government, even though he disagreed with them, you know, disagreed with their foundations. Likewise, when it came to the 8th Imam, one of his greatest companions was Ali ibn Yaqtin. And Ali ibn Yaqtin was a minister, a renowned minister in the government of Al-Ma'mun. One hadith says that one day Al-Ma'mun wanted to test the loyalty of Ali ibn Yaqtin. He wanted to see, are you more loyal to me or more loyal to Ali ibn Musa Ridha? So he gave him a gift. He gave him robes and he gave him some money, some gold dinars. So Ali ibn Yaqtin, the first thing that he did was that he went to the home of the Imam in order to present him with this gift. Little did he know that Al-Ma'mun had sent spies with him. So he presents the gift to the Imam. The Imam takes the money, he takes the money, the gold dinars, but he gives him back the robe. He says, you will need this. So Ali ibn Yaqtin goes back to Al-Ma'mun. Al-Ma'mun tells him that I've had people following you. I'm going to send them back home. Either you bring me back the present or it's off with your head. So what does he do? He goes back home, he takes the robes, which the Imam refused to take, and instead of the money which was given to him, he takes some of his own money and he gives it back to Al-Ma'mun. And through this gesture, the Imam was able to preserve the life of Ali ibn Yaqtin. And the Imam needed people like this, people who had influence. Not only was he influential, but he also wanted, since he saw it was an era of prosperity and that you can work with the government, he did this. Even though, the basis of that government was invalid according to him. So sometimes, and this comes from the wisdom of the Imam, that the Imam will work with the government even though he may not agree with them. Why? For the protection of his life and for the protection of Islam, for the protection of his followers, the followers of Ahlulbayt, for the protection of the Quran, for the protection of the values of Islam. The Imam sees it fit to work with such governments.
As you mentioned, he was limited in this role that he had, where he couldn't make any commands, he couldn't appoint anyone or couldn't take power from anyone. What was actually the role of the Imam? If we were to say day to day, what would the role of the Imam be as the vice to the Caliph? Did he have any specific roles to actually do?
The Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, even if we go back to the case, just to give an example, if you go back to the case of, for instance, Al-Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam and Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. We, as the followers of Ahlul Bayt, when it comes to the belief in Imamah is a position which is divinely appointed. Take the case of Ibrahim. When the Quran speaks of Nabiullah Ibrahim, the Prophet Ibrahim, and when Allah tells him, إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا, I have appointed you as a leader above the people. What does Ibrahim say? He says, وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي, from my progeny as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَا يَنَالُ عَهْدِي الظَّالِمِينَ, that my covenant, which is the Imamah, he is speaking of the Imamah, my covenant is not held by the oppressors. So what do we understand here? That even Ibrahim, who was appointed as an Imam, cannot choose who the Prophet will be after him. Allah says, لَا يَنَالُ عَهْدِي, my covenant, not your covenant. Not that you get to choose who the Imam is. This is a covenant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Imamah is chosen by Allah. Having said this, we say the following. That when an Imam, such as Al-Imam al-Hasan, when he signs a peace treaty, he is not handing over the Imamah over to Muawiyah. Merely all he was handing over was the political leadership. He wasn't handing him over the religious leadership. He retained his role as an Imam, because it's not his choice whether to give it up or to grant it to someone else. So when it comes to the case of the 8th Imam, he retained his role as the Imam. He recognized his role as the Imam. He did what was necessary and what was required. In the same way where people would come to Amir al-Mu'mineen and ask him questions and he would reply to them. The position of Khilafah meant nothing to him. One day he tells his cousin Abdullah ibn Abbas, and the Imam was known for mending his own shoes and sandals. He tells him, Ya ibn Abbas, what is the Khilafah worth? So Abdullah ibn Abbas says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, it is worth nothing. So Amir al-Mu'mineen says, it is worth less than this shoe that I am mending. The only thing which gives value to leadership is the ability to implement that which is good and forbid that which is evil. So the position of Khilafah meant nothing to the Imam. It was the position of Imamah, the position of guidance, which retained its value. And the Imam, the 8th Imam, retained this position throughout the entire time. When people would ask him questions, he would answer. When they would set up debates, it was his responsibility to respond with a convincing argument. So the Imam, answering your question, did not have a position of power. He did not really prohibit, and he did not command. Mostly it was being there when he was needed. Being there for the Muslim community. Being there for his companions when he was needed. This is basically, in a nutshell, what his responsibilities were.
Awesome. Thank you, Sayyidina. We have come to the end of the first part, inshallah. We will continue our discussion on the life of Imam Ridha, and inshallah lessons from his holy life. We've got quite a bit to cover. Please join us after this short break. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to 14 Divine Guides. We are looking at the life of Imam Ali ibn Musa Ridha, salamullahi alayh. May Allah grant us his ziyarat and his shafa'at in the next life. Just like Imam al-Sadiq Sayyidina, we noticed that because Imam al-Ridha gets a role in the government, he has time to do, as we mentioned in the first episode, he has a lot of debates which are again written and narrated to us, which we can benefit from, and he also has a lot of works in fiqh and in other Islamic laws, which show us that because he was at this role, he had maybe it was a bit more easy for him to do. And as you mentioned, he was alim Muhammad. The first works I would like to maybe discuss is that on Islamic law, which was something that was asked for him to do by Al-Ma'mun himself. What was this work?
His dissertation on Islamic law, which is commonly referred to as Jami'ah. Jami'ah referring to that which is comprehensive. Remember at the time, because there were so many different schools of thought which were emerging, as far as jurisprudence and as far as theology, and just different areas of Islamic knowledge, law, for instance. The Imam, the Khalifa at the time, Al-Ma'mun, wanted basically a comprehensive work on Islamic knowledge which can be presented to the masses at the time. So he requested from the Imam that he writes this work, and the Imam presented this work to Al-Fadl ibn Sahal, who was basically the prime minister of the government of Al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi, and this dissertation or this comprehensive work covers a wide array of subjects, mostly in the areas of jurisprudence. I mean, you can see why that he would request it from the Imam being the direct descendant of Rasulullah, and so they appreciated this fact, so they valued his work, they valued his commentary, and so he established the dissertation on Islamic law for this reason.
One of the most famous dissertations that he has is the medical one. What is this dissertation, and what was the reason for this?
Tibb al-Ridha, his dissertation basically on medicine, was according to historians also written upon the request of the Khalifa. And then after he wrote it, it later became known as the Ar-Risala al-Dhahabiyya, the golden letter or the golden article, because of its value at the time. And I mean, even people who were familiar with medicine, doctors, were very amazed and astounded basically by what the Imam was able to do. I mean, his medical opinions. These books are narrated today through other books. Ayun Akhbar al-Ridha, for instance, mentions some of the things in this book. Also, another book by the name of Tibb al-A'imma, the medicine of the Imams of Ahlulbayt alayhim as-salam, as well as some of the books of his seerah, such as the book, The Life of Imam Ridha the great Sheikh Baqir Sharif al-Qarashi as well mentions many of the narrations which are in these books, many of the guidelines, the medical guidelines which are mentioned in this book. But it's impressive that it was referred to as the golden article, basically, or the golden book, because of its value in medical information. And remember, I mean, this was during the time of the Islamic golden era, where there were amazing advancements in medicine, in biology, in technology, in science, in physics. I mean, at a time like this, the Imam presents something which is unmatched, is a pretty impressive feat. Yeah.
Ahsantum Sayyidina, if you, with your permission, I just want to read a passage from this, when the Imam speaks of the heart. And he says, as for the heart, it is one of Allah's marvelous signs in man's body, for it pumps the blood to all parts of the body, and the blood conveys food and oxygen in order to distribute them among all places of the body, and then it conveys the waste products in order to rid the body of them. So he speaks of oxygen and the way the body pumps blood out, as if a medical doctor is.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, it was of very, very high value at the time.
I also wanted to ask about the miracle of the rain.
Yes.
That happened also during the time of the Imam Salamullahi alayhi, and maybe you can also explain to us that this is something that is done where you also in California, where sometimes you lack rain.
Now we have it in Islamic law, basically in our books of jurisprudence, a type of prayer which is performed in order to bring down rain, Salat al-Istisqa. And it is said that Salat al-Istisqa, of course, has its conditions and it has its recommendations. I mean, for those who have performed the pilgrimage in Mecca and Medina, many times, especially in Medina, I mean, I remember almost every time that I've been, after the Fajr prayer, they perform Salat al-Istisqa, because it's a desert and rarely does rain ever reach them. So some people are familiar with it. I mean, I don't think you would be familiar with it here in London, but
we have lots of rain
in other parts of the world. In fact, this year in California, we prayed Salat al-Istisqa in order because of the rain, how dry it was because of the drought. Salat al-Istisqa, one way that it is performed, one of basically the recommended conditions, is that number one, it is performed in masses. So whoever is able to perform it goes out. It is recommended that it is not performed under a roof, so not inside a building, under the clear sky, and that everybody participate, the elderly, the women, the children, as well as the men. And as you are going out, you ask for mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the way a person should walk towards the prayer, they should walk in humility and humbleness, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bestow His blessings upon us. So it is said that during that time there was drought. So they wanted they wanted to perform Salat al-Istisqa, the call for rain, the prayer for rain. So everybody joined in this prayer. And like I said, when you call for Salat al-Istisqa, it has to be done in an open space. It is said that at this moment, Al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi realized how many supporters and followers the Imam had, because he wanted the Imam to lead the prayer. And he saw masses of people, just hundreds of thousands of people going towards the Imam, and that's when he felt a real threat towards his leadership, towards his Khilafah. And some narrations say it is at this point where he decided to get rid of the Imam. But yes, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the grace of the Imam, they saw the rain, and this is not something new to Ahlulbayt. I mean, even when we read when we read about the childhood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Abu Talib, his uncle, one day took him out and he asked rain from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the grace of the Prophet. His grandfather Abdul Muttalib also did the same thing. The Ahlulbayt, at the end of the day, they are the sources of our blessing, and they are our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
From one of the most famous stories is that of Imam Ridha, is al-Hadith al-Dhahabi, the golden narration,
Golden chain, yes.
or the golden chain, and we hear a lot of this, but we don't actually know what this golden chain is sometimes. What is this, and where did this take place?
Well, according to books of hadith, it is said that when the Imam was on his way to Khurasan, he reached an area which today some people also visit, the city of Neshabur, which is today less than an hour drive from the city of Mashhad. And they say that this is the first place where the Imam set his tents before entering the city of Mashhad, before finally reaching the city of Mashhad. So the people there, they came out rejoicing. They wanted to welcome the Imam with open arms. So they welcomed him and they told him, Yabna Rasulullah, narrate a hadith for us. I mean, those who heard the hadith narrated from the lips of the Imam, it's different than hearing it or reading it in a book. You know, it's much different. As simple as it is, it makes the biggest difference. And the hadith in itself was extremely simple. However, the way that it was narrated to them, this is what made it so popular. The Imam didn't, I mean, sometimes, usually when we read the hadith of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, they will narrate from their father, or they'll narrate from themselves, or they will say, for instance, Qala Rasulullah, Rasulullah said so and so, without mentioning the chain. But this chain which he mentioned was, I mean, the way he mentioned it made the hadith very popular. So he narrates from his father, Imam Musa al-Kadhem, who narrates from his father, the sixth Imam, who narrates from the fifth, who narrates from the fourth, who narrates from the third, from the second, from the first, from Rasulullah, and then he mentions the chain of narration from Rasulullah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through Jibreel, through al-Lawh, through al-Qalam, basically the tablets, through the pencil, all the way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the hadith is hadith Qudsi, which is a hadith which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. He says, قُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, say that there is no God but Allah. But this testimony comes with its conditions, and I am one of its conditions. Meaning, in order to complete your faith, in order to complete your Islam, you must accept us as the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. A hadith which gained much popularity, and these days it is read in majalis in the same way that, for instance, Hadith al-Kisa is mentioned. This is basically just a brief introduction to the golden chain.
Ahsantum Sayyidina. We noticed that the Imam has a lot of these works on jurisprudence, as we mentioned, on Islamic law, and he lived at a time where he could write or speak in a free way, because a lot of the time Al-Ma'mun ordered him to do so. Yes. Or sometimes even I feel Al-Ma'mun maybe wanted to test him, especially when it came to the medical field. He wanted to or try and, wal-'iyadhu billah, embarrass the Imam in front of other scholars, but obviously he couldn't do that. Are any of these works written for us to learn from, or are any of these works available for us today?
Yes, many of them are narrated through, the important parts of them are narrated through the books of Sirah. The best book which I have come across, which I mean basically is a treasure of the words and the works of the eighth Imam, is the book Uyun Akhbar al-Ridha, which is a compilation of the works and the sayings of the eighth Imam, and which is translated into, originally in Arabic, translated into different languages. In English, I'm sure it is available. if you want to kind of get a glimpse of some of the works of the Imam, they are narrated through these sources.
Before we, I think, inshallah, in the final part, we'll look at the reasons for the Imam's martyrdom and his burial and his visitation, which we have many narrations about. We notice, just like I know when you spoke in an earlier show I did with about Imam al-Sadiq salamullahi alayhi, we noticed that Imam al-Sadiq gives a lot of attention to what happens in Karbala, and I think most the Imams, all the Imams do, after Imam al-Hussein, from Imam Zayn al-Abidin all the way up until our awaited Imam al-Mahdi, who obviously bases his revolution against those that killed Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Again, Imam Ridha, we notice, and again in my limited understanding of his holy life, I noticed that he establishes, just like Imam Sadiq, the mourning of Imam al-Hussein, and we see a majlis take place just as we see today, for example, where, for example, someone might say, why are you sitting down and crying and remembering Imam al-Hussein? You know, this is, even if, and I'm talking about people from our own school might say, where did this come from? But we notice that Imam Ridha sort of establishes this, and we have narrations about this. What is the relationship that we see of Imam Ridha to that of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam?
The revolution and the tragedy of Imam Hussein alayhi salam represents the fountainhead. It is the centerpiece of the school of thought of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam. And it has lived from even before it happened. I mean, not only the Imams after, as you mentioned, but the Prophet himself, and in our companions, the prophets who came before the Prophet, Prophet Adam, Prophet Nuh, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, according to authentic narrations from our books, were foretold of the tragedy that would take place, and so that they would weep. However, the act of majalis did not exist before it happened. The majalis began to take place after his martyrdom, and the first people who established it were the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, beginning with Al-Imam al-Sadiq. Al-Imam al-Kadhem alayhi salam, even under the oppression which he witnessed, the 8th Imam narrates, he says that when the 1st of Muharram would arrive, my father would not smile anymore. And he would weep every day until the 10th day. Every day was a tragedy until the 10th day, where it was the greatest of tragedies. Al-Imam Ridha alayhi salam, likewise, he walked in the footsteps of his of his father and his grandfather. And so how did he do it? He would invite people who, poets basically, people who knew how to spread the message through lamentation. I mean, it was up to them to educate the people of what happened, but they also gave the responsibility of lamenting and attracting the emotions of people to their companions. People such as Da'bil al-Khuza'i, who was known as a famous poet. It is said that one day he enters the home of Al-Imam al-Ridha, and he sees, everywhere is covered in black ornaments, and the Imam himself is in a very sad state. So the Imam informs him that it is Muharram, and of course he knows, but it is at this point where the Imam gives him the instructions to recite poetry and lament the tragedy of Imam Hussein. And so Da'bil mentions his famous lines of poetry, which today, I mean, among Arabic majalis, they're always mentioned on the pulpit, on top of the mimbar. He has a very strong saying, the Imam. He says, "Inna yawm al-Husayn aqraha jufunana." That the day of Hussein, the tragedy of Hussein, has basically, because we have wept so much, it has damaged our jufun, our eyelids. إن يوم الحسين أقرح جفوننا وأسال دموعنا. Our tears have been shed. وأذل عزيزنا. The person who was the greatest of people at his time was massacred in such a humiliating way. وأورثنا الكرب والبلاء إلى يوم الانقضاء. He says that we have inherited this calamity, us and our followers have inherited this calamity إلى يوم الانقضاء, until the day of judgment. فعلى مثل الحسين فليبكي الباكون. It is for people like Hussein that we should shed our tears. So not only did the Imam establish it in his own home, he didn't only encourage his own companions, but he said that from now until the day of judgment, we will remember Imam Hussein alayhi salam. There will never come a time for our followers where they will say we don't need to commemorate Imam Hussein anymore. This is the words of, if we believe in the words of the Imam. If we don't believe the words of the Imam and we want to follow our own desires, then say yes, let's stop crying. But if you follow in the footsteps of the Imam, he says, أورثنا الكرب والبلاء. We have inherited this. أورثنا, inherited, meaning us as followers of Ahlulbayt. This is something which sticks to us, we cannot separate from. In the same way that you inherit your father's last name. Can I say that I don't inherit my father's last name? I can't. I can maybe change my name in my passport, but that doesn't mean I'm not my father's son. I will always be my father's son, no matter how much I try to fight it. He says we have inherited the tragedy, Imam Ridha. We have inherited the tragedy. As long as you are a true follower of Ahlul Bayt, this calamity, according to the Imam of Ahlul Bayt, he says that there lies within the hearts of the followers of Ahlul Bayt a burning flame which burns for the tragedies of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. So again, not only did the Imam establish it at his time, but he said that for generations to come until the day of judgment, we shall also establish the lamentation commemorating the martyrdom of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam.
Thank you very much, Sayyidina. May Allah grant you the ziyarat and the shafa'at of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. We have sadly come to the end of the second part. And inshallah we are going for a short break. Please join us after this break. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to 14 Divine Guides. We have been looking at the life of Ali ibn Musa Ridha salamullahi alayh. The time has actually worked against us because there has been so many points that we would have loved to cover on the life of Imam Ali ibn Musa Ridha, but sadly because of time being limited, we had to pick a few points to cover on his life. Inshallah, I think that should encourage our viewers to do extra reading themselves onto the life of Imam Ali ibn Musa Ridha salamullahi alayh. Before we move to the remembering the sad passing away and the martyrdom of Imam Ali ibn Musa Ridha, if we can just mention the Imam's family himself and his wife and his children.
Well, the wife of the Imam, who was the mother of the 9th Imam, Imam al-Jawad, was just like his own mother, not a native Arab. In fact, they say that the Imam himself, because his mother was not a native Arab, he was very dark-skinned. And also his son was also dark-skinned. Of course, among his sons was the 9th Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam, who ended up becoming an Imam at a very young age and also passing away at a very young age. His son, the 9th Imam, was forced to marry the daughter of al-Ma'mun. And this is one of the ways that al-Ma'mun tried to establish a closer bond to the Imam, is by giving his daughter to the Imam. So his daughter, al-Fadl, was given to the 9th Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam, in order to marry.
Who ended up, I think, poisoning him as well.
Yes, who also ended up poisoning him, yes. of course, on the orders of the Khalifa himself.
Also, I think when we will look at this, the burial, just to show the closeness, Imam Ridha is now, and a lot of people don't know this, and I only recently found out that Harun al-Rashid is buried next to Imam Ridha, and this is again the works of al-Ma'mun. Al-Ma'mun puts Imam Ridha, as we mentioned, in his government, and then decides to poison him, which seems a bit, as in, why all of a sudden do you poison the person that you have had by your side, who you've benefited from in debates with other schools, and that has sort of shown your power, and the people have supported you because of this man being by your side. And all of a sudden al-Ma'mun, who we said is a very clever man, decides to poison the Imam. Why did he, the first question, why did he decide? What was the motive behind al-Ma'mun to kill and get rid of Imam Ali ibn Musa Ridha, and how did he go about doing this?
Well, according to some historians, his decision to appoint the Imam as second in line, as his heir, ended up actually backfiring on him, because the Imam, although he was not given a real position of power, he was not able to command or to prohibit, he was not able to install anyone in power or take anyone away from power. Although he did not have that real power, the position of power, but at the same time people's hearts inclined to him. People began to fall in love with him. He began to become very famous, and that was too much for al-Ma'mun to handle. Now, among historians today, some will suggest that it was not the decision of al-Ma'mun to get rid of the Imam. It was the decision of somebody else, and al-Ma'mun could not afford to lose the Imam. However, I mean, these are historical debates. They're not like they're not like jurisprudential debates in jurisprudence where one says something is haram and the other says something is wajib. I mean, these are up for discussion. But in reality, I mean, when you really study the history of that time, you'll find that no, in fact it was him. I mean, in the same way that he threatened him with death if he not accept the position of Khilafah after him. I mean, a person who is willing to kill the Imam for not accepting is also a person who is willing to kill the Imam for having too much influence and having too much power. So the al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi, basically he consolidated his power, he established it, and perhaps he didn't see a need to having the Imam anymore, or the fact that the Imam was gaining too much popularity, and that, okay, well now al-Ma'mun is not immortal. I mean, he's going to die. So he knew that if he was going to die, well, of course the Imam was going to be his successor, and in reality he never wanted that, not in the first place. So he said that I'll get rid of him before I pass away. And he did not last for too long. Al-Ma'mun didn't last for too long after the Imam. So, I mean, if he would not have killed the Imam, he probably would have died before, and I mean, the Imam would have become the Khalifa at the time. In the end, they never really loved the Imams of Ahlulbayt, even the ones who showed some sort of mercy or compassion or didn't show their hatred towards the Imams of Ahlulbayt. At the end, they weren't on the same boat. It didn't benefit them to be around them.
We also noticed that even though the Imam was part of the government, narrations tell us that at no time did the Imam flatter or even praise al-Ma'mun in any way.
Yes.
And that showed the people that that the Imam did not agree with al-Ma'mun. He was sort of forced.
Of course. The Imam preserved his limits. The Imam preserved his limits. He didn't do anything which was not necessary. I mean, sometimes we have in the hadith where the Imams would be summoned to the Khalifa I mean, and the most that they would do was say, when they addressed the Khalifa, was say, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. I mean, that's the most that they would do, just because it was required of them. If everyone else is referring to the Khalifa as Amir al-Mu'mineen and this person is not, then that can pose a threat, a danger. But he never did anything which was not necessary. I mean, and this is, even when we read the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali alayhi salam, for those 30 years that he was not Khalifa after the death, after the martyrdom of Rasulullah, he never did anything which was unnecessary. He only did that which was necessary, guidance, advice, things of that nature. And that's, the same goes for the 8th Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa radiallahu alayhi.
In narrations, it's the month of Safar that the Imam reaches martyrdom. What is the means that Al-Ma'mun takes to kill Imam Ridha salamullahi alayhi?
Through just like the Imams before him, through poison grapes actually. Now some people ask the question, well, if the Imam knew that these grapes were poisoned, then why did he eat them? Well, I mean, every Imam knew that at one point or another they would lose their life, you know, not through natural means. The Ahlulbayt themselves, they say that none of them lost their lives through natural means. None of them. They were all either killed with the sword, like Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or through poison. So, I mean, to answer this, we have to basically open another door. That's, you know, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala required of them. We know as the followers of Ahlul Bayt that everything that they did was upon the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, I mean, this could be one way of showing how oppressed that they were, that none of them passed away through natural means. As look at the Imam, he was the second in line to the throne, but he was still oppressed. And just looking at the way he passed away shows you how oppressed he was. Of course, at that time, assassination through poison was a very popular means, a very quiet way of getting rid of an opponent, of an enemy. And this is the way that he got rid of the Imam.
Moving on, alhamdulillah, I was blessed to be in Mashhad last year. The ziyarat of Imam Ridha is quite special. And we noticed that there are many narrations on visiting Imam Ridha salamullahi alayhi. Even though he has now millions visiting him yearly, I know during his martyrdom, which is in Safar, a number of billions people visit Imam Ridha during Ramadan. It's quite, Shahr Ramadan is quite busy. During Muharram, even during the Iranian Eid al-Nowruz. Yes. Again, I've noticed that it's very busy to visit Imam Ridha, and even in my visits, I've never seen it quiet, where you can go and maybe hold onto the shrine and ask for your hajat. But he's still known as Gharib al-Ghuraba, salamullahi alayh. What are these narrations about his visitation, and why is it emphasized in narrations by other Imams? I even read a narration from, I think, Imam al-Jawad or Imam al-Hadi, where someone says, asks the Imam, I have the opportunity to visit the Prophet, or the opportunity to visit your father. He says, visit my father. And then he says, the opportunity to visit your grandfather Rasulullah. And Imam Ali says, visit, and it goes on until he always says, visit my father. Why is there so much emphasis on the ziyarah of Imam Ridha?
Number one, the first person to speak of the ziyarah of Imam Ridha was the Prophet himself. According to hadith, the Prophet himself says the following. He says, a piece of me will be buried in Khurasan. A piece of me will be buried in Khurasan. He who visits the one that is buried in Khurasan, Allah shall forgive all of his sins. And if he asks for anything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall grant it to him. This is from the Prophet. From the Imams of Ahlul Bayt as well. His father, al-Imam al-Kadhem, he says, he who shall visit my son after his passing away, after his martyrdom, his visitation is equal to the reward of 70 Hajj. So the narrator says, 70 Hajj? The Imam says to him, no, 70,000 Hajj. Don't underestimate, he was trying to tell him, don't underestimate the reward of visiting my son after his passing away. Other ahadith, they say that he who visits the Imam shall visit him 3 times after his death. Once when he is standing for judgment, once when he is passing over the Sirat, and once, of course, when he is in his grave, when he is experiencing the loneliness in his grave. Another hadith says that on the Day of Judgment, near the Arsh, the celestial realm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there will be 4 of the Al-Awwaleen and 4 of the Akhirin. The first, people coming from the first era, the era of the Prophet, and 4 coming from the era of Rasulullah. The first 4 will be the prophets of Ulul Azm, besides the Prophet himself. So Nuh and Musa and Ibrahim and Isa. And the second 4 will be Muhammad, Ali, Hassan and Hussein alayhim salam. These 4 will be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. And then the hadith continues and says that where the last 4 are sitting, so if you can imagine they're sitting on a piece of cloth, for instance, he says this piece of cloth will extend and will include everyone who has visited us, especially those who have visited the 8th Imam, Al-Imam Ali ibn Musa Ridha. So imagine on the Day of Judgment being in that proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the same proximity as Rasulullah, as Imam Ali, as Imam Hassan, as Imam Hussein. Truly this is a blessing. Now the reasons, number 1, because he is Gharib al-Ghuraba. As grand as his shrine is today, and mashallah, it is the most grand, and it is the largest by if we were to count the area which it covers, it is the most out of all the Imams of Ahlulbayt. At the same time, he is Gharib, he is far away. I mean, you go to Medina and you see 4 Imams laying next to each other. You go to Karbala, there is Imam Hussein and his brother Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Even the Imams in Baghdad and in Samarra, they're with each other, but this one is very far away, very gharib, very lonely. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that we bless those who perform pilgrimage. We bless those who immigrate and who are faced with oppression and with tyranny. We bless them and we allow the hearts of the people basically to incline towards them.
Ahsantum, may Allah grant you, Sayyidina, the ziyarah. If we were, and this is especially I think for the youth living in the West, to take some lessons, or even if it was one lesson from this grand life of Imam Ali ibn Musa Ridha salamullahi alayhi, what would that lesson or lessons be for us to take on board with us, especially for those I think living in the West?
According to my very humble opinion and very limited knowledge, if you study the life of Imam Ridha alayhi salam, remember, I mean, he was the only one after Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen to be given any position of power. However, I mean, through the good and through the bad, the Imam always maintained his same attitude. Nothing ever changed for the Imam. I mean, if you go now to Mashhad and you visit the museum of the shrine, you will find coins which were printed, silver coins which were printed with the name of the Imam. I mean, this is how important he was. And the Imam, he realized this, and everything was at his disposal. Had the Imam asked for anything from Al-Ma'mun, he would have given it to him. If he would have said, I want the crown on your head, he would have received it. I mean, in fact, this is what Al-Ma'mun wanted from the Imam. He wanted him to request so that he can have a favor upon the Imam. So the Imam had everything at his disposal. He could have had anything that he wanted, but he maintained his attitude. The same attitude as his father, who had nothing, who was in a dungeon in a prison. So if we want to learn anything, number 1, take something from his name. He is referred to as Al-Ridha. Number one, always be satisfied with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with Ahlul Bayt. Allow them to be satisfied with you. Satisfy your friends and satisfy even the ones who turn against you. Number one. Number two, whatever life throws at you, don't change. Whether you become a CEO of a Fortune 500 company or you have a regular, as we say in America, a blue-collar job, working a normal job. Don't let that affect you. Don't let it affect your values as a Muslim and as a believer. Look at the Imam. The Imam was given everything at his disposal, but did that faze him? Did he stop worshipping? Did he stop being a slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Not at all. And look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded him. Not only was he given mulk, was he given this grand position in his life, but after his life. According to the hadith says that Mashhad will always be a place, a haven for the followers of Ahlul Bayt. It will always be a place where the angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall continuously descend upon. Always be a place of blessing. And if you read the history of Mashhad for the past hundreds of years, it has always been a sanctuary for the followers of Ahlul Bayt. Comparing it to Baqi', which was attacked and destroyed until today remains destroyed, and comparing to the shrine of Imam Hussein, which was also sacked and destroyed, comparing it to Baghdad and Samarra, Mashhad has always been a sanctuary for the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. So inshallah, these are some things which we can benefit from the life of the 8th Imam, al-Imam Ali ibn Musa alayhi salam.
Thank you very much, Sayyidina. On behalf of Ahlulbayt TV and the viewers, I would like to thank you for the 2 episodes on the life of Imam Ali ibn Musa Ridha. May Allah grant you his ziyarat very soon, and inshallah his shafa'at. We thank Sayyid Mahdi al-Qazwini, and inshallah, my dear viewers, you have benefited from these episodes. Again, if you would like to see them again, or if you missed any of the previous episodes or the previous episode on Imam Ridha salamullahi alayhi, inshallah they are available on demand. Thank you for watching, and inshallah we will see you in the next episode of 14 Divine Guides. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ahlulbayt TV, the holy household for every household.